Hey, welcome to episode 7 of the Articulate Ox podcast. I am your host, Soma79. Thank you so much for joining me today. My guest is Randall, aka Upgrade. He is the executive producer of my upcoming album, Drinking Songs for Children, which we completed last year. He produced a bunch of beats on the album, and he worked on some songs with me with Cool Keith, and Esoteric from Czarface, and Aztec, Young Dirty Bastard, Raz Cass, Elza. Mac Lethal, he's a talented dude, and he really made my album sound a lot better, so I'm totally appreciative of that. He's been working in the digital music business for a long time, and he really knows his stuff. He's great at mixing, making beats. He's super talented, and he can make anything sound better. So, my interview here, we talk about Hex by Arc Patrol, which is a song that I wasn't really familiar with. So, yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you so much for joining me. Excellent. All right. Welcome to the Articulate Ox podcast. I'm your host, Soma79. My guest today is Randall, also known by the name of Upgrade. How you doing today, Ryan?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So I'm really happy to have you on here. I'm gonna go right to me here and say you were the guy who really helped mix my album coming out next year, and so I'm super grateful for that. It sounds 1,000 times better than I ever would have if I had done it myself. So I would love to know more about the person who actually made my music sound so much better. So I'm really happy you agreed to be on here, man.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, glad to do it.
Sweet, man. So you've been producing for pretty much as long as I've known you, like maybe like 20 something years. You've been making beats, and what do you talk a little bit about what you do and what you're into?
Yeah, for sure. So, I got my start through DJing. I was into drum and bass and all kinds of different music of those genres. And got into producing from there. A friend of mine that Judge the Disciple, we were hanging out at the time and said, hey, I need some beats for some of my projects. What can you do? And just got into producing from there. Grabbed my first copy of Fruity Loops and went to town and made I'm sure terrible beats, but had a lot of fun from there. Enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed that way more than I enjoyed DJing. And hip hop was kind of easier than drum and bass to produce, I guess. And so that's maybe kind of like what got me into doing that, and produced drum and bass for years and years. I feel like I made my first drum and bass track, I don't know, only like a couple of years ago for fun. I don't know why it took me so long to do that.
Yeah, because I think my earliest memories of you were probably drum and bass shows, like at Fitchburg, Wall Civic Center, like stuff like that, like way back in the day. I think I met you through people
Asylum
like
out in
that.
Springfield and all that.
Yeah. And I mean, I sort of got into that through DJing too. It's just, you mentioned Fruity Loops, which is interesting. So that to me is something that a lot of producers from our era talk about. Was that a real, like, I've never actually played with that. I went straight to Pro Tools, and I went from a 4-track cassette tape to Pro Tools, like the earliest M-Box. So I never used that. Was that a real game changer for you? Did that just change the way you thought about making music, or how'd that stumble upon you?
I don't think anything specific about Fruity Loops did, right? Before I was kind of trying to make music in a different way, right? Like putting together records and turntablism, that sort of thing. It's just a completely different vibe than working in the box, right? Like having a DAW in the computer or whatever you're using, and like putting together beats like sequencing loops and stuff. I mean, it's for somebody who's maybe not as musically inclined, like I'm really not, I joke, it's like making beats in Excel. It's so easy to work in some of those things. I think Fruity Loops especially is really easy to get into, but there's other ones too that people use right out of the gate, like GarageBand, or there's plenty of them that are easy. But still to this day, I think it's a great program. There's nothing wrong with it. It sounds great. Top 40 producers, I think, use it all the time. I think I read an interview about some of the techniques and things that you and I were discussing, and even one of them was just walking through their process on using it. So
yeah, actually,
that's got a lot of love for it.
Yeah, let's so the topic you want to talk about, I had actually never heard this song before, though I listened to it and I freaking loved it. I guess you mentioned that it's in Euphoria, which is one of those million shows I've been meaning to watch. But Hex by Arc Patrol. This is funny when I listen to this, I immediately thought of you. Like it had like not beats you made before this. Song was like 2016 or something. Like beats you made prior to that. Like I could tell where the connection was there and why you would dig this. The sonic range on it. You mentioned to me something about the underwater sound to it. Talk a little bit about that song because I was you were one of the first people on who picked something that kind of probably came to them later in their career. So I'm interested into how this sound really shaped development of your music.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it's always been about I hear something that sounds interesting from like a technique, right? How did they get that sound? How did they get that to do that, right? And for me, that's kind of like what attracts me to music, where somebody else might say, "Hey, I want to learn more about that producer and how were they inspired and what was their message trying to say." And I mean, I think there's a lot of interest in those things. For me, it's more about right, like I heard that thing. How did they do that? How did they accomplish that? And one of the things I've always loved playing with is like distortion, bit crushing, how to like degrade sound in a fun way. When I got into hip hop, a lot of my early influences were like Definitive Jux,
Yep.
LP, Cannibal Ox, all of those things. And they did a lot of that. And I kind of emulated a lot of that in my music and was also like looking for more ways to sort of break out and like find my own voice, my own ways to do that. And one of the things I like doing was using like what you call bit crushers. And we don't have to get too into the detail, but really it's just like something that degrades the sound, reduces the quality of digital audio. You can reduce the bit depth or the sample rate, which just makes it sound worse, but in kind of like interesting ways.
What are some, because I mean I make beats all the time. I've never used a bit crusher. I can't even say it right. Is that a name brand or is that like another thing like reverb or something like that?
Yeah. You'd think of like bit crushing or degrading is similar to saying like reverb, right? And there's a lot
Okay.
of different plugins that do it. Stock plugins. I was using stock plugins on Fruity Loops that worked really well for that. When I was doing some research on some of these newer techniques, I found the plugin that a lot of people talk about and use now is Decimort. Just one of
Yep.
these random plugins out there that does a good job of degrading the sound, but making it sound good. Right? There's a lot of magic in like the algorithms that these companies use to try to get that effect.
Yeah.
So I
And it's just real quick, for anybody who doesn't know, we're
sure.
talking about plugins with digital music. It's almost like a guitar pedal, but with like way more settings that they assign digitally. So it's something it's like a filter. Like if you think of what an Instagram filter does to a photograph, a plugin is a way that you could filter your sound to get different effects. So if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Absolutely. So here we go. In whenever it was, I mean, I think Euphoria came out, 2020, something like that.
That makes sense.
Probably everybody heard this song if they were like exposed to HBO or anything around that time. This would come on every day while we were just sort of scrolling through for stuff to watch. And I heard the sound and I loved it. And what I think was really interesting about this song is, unlike a lot of the other songs that use this technique current day, and we'll talk about that in a sec, they use this really interesting effect that sounds kind of underwater. It's hard to really describe unless you hear it, but listen to the
Right
song
then.
and you'll know
Right.
what I'm talking about right away. What I really liked was a little ways through the song, they actually kind of like pull back the curtain a little bit. They raise this low pass filter they have to kind of expose you to more of the sound. And you can hear a little bit of what's under there. And all of a sudden I was keyed into the fact that they're using this like sample rate crushing or bit crushing to get that effect. It's kind of like just a noticeable sound if you know it, if you heard it. And that got me looking into that. Like what is that they're doing? I really like that effect. How can I play with it? And that kind of got me keyed into the fact that this is really a big thing, and particularly from this producer 40 that works with Drake. And I learned about how they kind of just wanted to come up with their own sort of unique sound, their own way of like creating space in the mix for the artist, for the rapper. And so instead of just using a low pass filter like you might normally hear, which just cuts out the high end, they started using the sample rate crushing, which uses some other kind of like math, tricks to kind of get rid of the high end and gives it this really interesting feel. And started learning all about that, experimenting with it in my work. And that's kind of like what attracts me to those things. When I hear somebody doing something and I want to figure out what it is, how'd they do it, and then how can I maybe take that and incorporate things into my music.
Yeah, it's fun. Like, so with the example you just gave about 40 and Drake, what they sort of did is they decided that they're going to keep, like, take all the high end out of the beat and just kind of keep the low end area so that the voice could occupy, so that the vocals could occupy, the high end, which is something that it sounds like it makes perfect sense, but no one ever would really do that. And with them doing these songs that were fairly simple, they had major impact with them. It's something is wrong until it's right, I guess.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love hearing from 40 his perspective on it, and anybody can check this out if you Google this, the Drake underwater sound and 40. You can check out interviews where he talks more about that. But I love that idea that they wanted to carve out their own sort of sound, their own like sonic space. Right, you're listening to one track after another, and here comes this track that has its own sound. Of course, it doesn't hurt when you've got Drake who's going to put this out into the world, right? Like you
Right.
and I could decide we were going to change the game with our own sound in
Right.
our basements,
Right.
right?
And like especially when you see where this, it's like he shows this guy's neighborhood in Toronto, and it's the most unassuming place. But um the studio, when you saw 40 studio, it had that warm feeling to it. I mean, I'm sort of in my studio here. You can't really see it, but I have all my equipment here, my drum machines and stuff. And it's a very homey feeling, and I like that idea that he had, or essentially it's almost like I have all the equipment, he probably has all these dinky drum machines from back in the day and all the good ones and the bad ones, just plug them in and go. It's sort of like a kid in a candy shop, it feels like,
Yeah,
but very tactile. And I don't know, it's a great environment to make music, it looks like, and
the
obviously very
studio
great
looks mad
results.
fun. Yeah, for real.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking too. So, you made the beat for, as well as basically mixing my entire album. You made the beat for a few of the songs. One of the ones you did is a title song, "Drinking Songs for Children," which features myself. It features Dylan Playfair from the TV show Letterkenny, Raz Cass, LA hip hop legend, Elza, Detroit hip hop legend, and Young Dirty Bastard, the son of Wu-Tang's Old Dirty Bastard. So, you were talking a little bit about switching sounds up and being able to account, how in those in the song we're talking about, just switching it up for different parts of the song. There you have a bunch of very distinct voices. You got one white dude from Canada, you got me from New England, you get these dudes from multiple parts of the country. I know. Did you apply any of those same techniques when mixing that song, or how was it working with that, getting those vocals at different times, and how does that all kind of come together?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was thinking about something different at the time that this came up, which was I was listening to some sort of classic hip hop, some stuff from like Nas, where it was really, really simple beats and really left a lot of room for the artist to shine, right? And right, if you've got a good MC who can really flow, all you really need is that nice groove, that bass, that snare that hits just right, and kind of keep it simple from there. And so when I started off that track, that's kind of what I was thinking. And I like that because, like you said, like I think you can really hear that difference, right? Every verse has its own kind of unique kind of take and feel to it. And you really get to feel that because I think the beat itself isn't taking up too much. I think like a lot of the stuff I make, I can't control myself.
Right.
I love to really like put my own spin and put a lot of interesting stuff in there. So it's probably even, more crowded than it needs to be. But that was the goal. And I think you hear that in some of the verses when you just kind of can really like click with what they're saying, what you're saying, and just kind of groove with it.
Yeah, I think too, and I hadn't really thought about this till now, but one of the things that was, I think, the first new beat I had for the album. You gave that to me. It was like pre-pandemic, and I just kind of sat around and evolved a little bit from then. But like, I love how much space it gave me, where I know that it's like you could spit double time on it. You could go, just with the straight up beat, and like I could just hear so many different flows on it. So I was so excited when we were able to get those guests on it, because the combination of your style and that, I can't wait for more people to hear that.
Yeah,
Um,
for real. It was a ton of fun. Yeah. I think it came
yeah,
out great.
yeah. So I'm super pumped about that. So once you started listening, once you did this, I know you seem to take like a hiatus away from music, as we all kind of, did, do different parts of my life. I was just super excited you're coming back to it around the same time as me. Was some of this music helping bring you back in, or what was it that kind of got you back going again?
Yeah. Man, what was it that got me going? I had some friends that encouraged me to get into it. I had another friend who was also getting back into producing after or a long hiatus. And I've had some ideas and things that I wanted to get out and just hadn't made it happen. And so I think it probably didn't hurt that a couple of years ago I tore up my knee real bad in training, and I had to get like knee surgery and was like in my basement, like laying on a couch for months and months. And I was like, you know what? If there's going to be a time, this is the time. Let me get in. Let me get a new flow going with the right tools. Start some new music. I had since the last time I had produced, working strictly in hip hop, I wanted to try messing around with some new trap beats and bass music and all sorts of things. And I did that, right over here in the trap den, like I said, just like experimenting, messing around, having fun, and not really releasing a lot, just like making music for the fun of it. I'm really about just enjoying that, making beats for friends, working on this project with you, other people I work with. We do like beat production challenges, which are a ton of fun and let you really just kind of like experiment. That really, I think that too kind of like ignited my love for doing it, is taking some of the pressure off of like, I got to make a song that's going to go out, people are going to judge it, and more just, okay, like me and my friends are going to make some tracks and laugh about them, and like what kind of crazy sound or effect can you come up with, or like what kind of awesome jam can you make out of like a few weird sounds, things like that. So
It's funny too, because
a lot of different things got me sort of inspired back into it.
when we were younger, there was so much more pressure about like the financial end. Not pressure, but everybody. That's a lot how a lot of people got validation out of it. Was like, oh, like, did you get paid for the show? Someone, I did a song with so and so. Well, did you have to pay him? And it was like, if you didn't, then somehow it meant that you had like more clout or something, or like he was doing it for the love, or And it's funny that like, so since then, obviously, music is just less. The more and more music there is, the less it's kind of worth, and now it's worth fractions of a penny on Spotify. But I think what it sort of brought back, well, for me as someone making music, I don't really care if I make money off of it. Like, and it's like, I think that's brought so much of the joy back to it. And I think I don't miss those days of wondering whether, oh, can I somehow like make this into something? It's like, it's so much freeing now to just do what I want to do.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people out there though that are trying to be about that hustle. And I have a lot of respect for
Yeah.
that. It's hard. It's especially hard today.
Moving
And
target.
there's so many people I work with who are just, they make me feel, like, embarrassed with how hard they work and how much time they put in to achieve those results. For me, the music is more of a hobby, right? I have my day gig to kind of keep, me and my family secure. And I get to look at music that way and have fun with it, which is nice. But, so much love and respect for the people that are out there just trying to make it happen, putting their heart and soul into it, because that comes out in the music for sure. I'm happy with my music. I love my music. But like I said, I've got mad respect for the people that are really, really trying to make it happen and putting their all into it.
Yeah. The idea of touring for me is the thing that always stopped me from trying to push it harder. Cause I was like, when I was doing like Monarchy with those other guys, I was like, I guess the next step would probably do some shows on the road. And I'm just like, oh, no, I'm done. Like, that's the level of effort that I'm not willing to take.
Yeah. Hey,
But
I feel you. Listen, I always love just being in the studio. I
me too.
mean, all the time, if I had to choose between going out and doing the shows or just spending the night in the studio, just like trying to like work through ideas and stuff, that for me is the stuff that appeals to me. So,
Me too.
hey, it is what it is.
Yeah. And that was some of the best times too. I remember when we first started hanging out, going into, was it Soundtrack Studio in
Oh
Boston?
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a great experience. I mean, so we were working there at the time, and that's where we recorded. We mentioned before Judge the Disciple, who's I guess a Quincy based MC who we've both known for a long time. It was really phenomenal. It's just, this dude's got a style really all his own, and just you know, you worked with them a bunch. I worked with them a bunch back in the day, and we used to go in there and I'd watch you guys record things. Like, what was it like having those tools at your hands at an early age? That really changed, the way you saw music, or?
Yeah, I mean, for real, we were blessed, right? I had this day gig with this studio that was great, but they shut down at 5 and said, "Hey, you can use the studios every night or weekends." Of course, right? A
Yeah.
bunch of kids in their 20s and we get free studio time. I mean, we would have paid, what, hundreds of thousands of dollars for as much time as we got
Yes.
in there every weekend, messing around, making beats, trying to make it work. It was a ton of fun and it was great. You're spoiled in a way, right? When I ended up moving on from that job, didn't have access to that stuff anymore. That was tough, right?
Yeah.
What do you do when you have this idea? Do you want to put it together? And either you got to go make it happen with a for real studio, come up with the money, or you got to make it happen with your egg crates in the closet. That definitely has an impact. But I've loved to learn the sort of like the basement production. Granted, if you're going to do something and try to make some money off it, go get a good room. Go get a clean sound. But there's nothing wrong with making it work. You hear about, right? I heard about stories about what's her name, Billie Eilish and her brother. How they were putting together tracks in their bedroom.
Yeah.
Using just all the entry level notebook stuff, and look what they can do with it.
Yeah, it's funny you actually mentioned that. I have this record right here by this artist Yaya Bay that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And I every time I listen to her, I can't tell whether it was the best sounding closet recording ever or the most amazing recreation of a closet recording in a real studio. And like I haven't bothered to look it up, but like it's got that distinct sound where you're just like, it's one or the other, but whatever it is, it works.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the beautiful thing to music. I still have some of the same equipment I was using back in the days before, and it still comes in handy. The like these drum machines kind of last forever, and the sounds kind of disappear if people don't keep using them. And it's I have one of them over here that has a digital theremin in it. I think that's what you called it, and it's just like I'm like, this nobody may be playing with this sound. I mean, this sound like maybe gets played with like twice a year, probably across the world. Like it's just like the options are limitless.
Yeah. You can make it with anything. I mean, and limitations, right? I've heard that said a bunch of times, that like limitations a lot of times are what make the music special, right? What can you come up with when your back's against the wall? You don't have the tools you want or the space you need. I think it can be a challenge, right? And you rise to that challenge. You come up with some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like having beat challenges with other people because how do things like that usually work? I've never really been involved in that sort of thing before.
Yeah, so that's a ton of fun. So at my company, I work for this company, Soundwide, and so a bunch of brands you might know of: Isotope, Native Instruments, Plugin Alliance, Brainworks, and
Amazing
we
plugins.
it's some really awesome stuff, and I'm blessed to get to work with some really like amazing minds, great producers, and we'll get together and just do challenges. So somebody will say, hey, here's these sound effects we recorded, out on this session. See what you can do with it. Everybody make a song out of these. Or it might be, hey, remix this track and pick whatever genre you want, something out of your comfort zone. And people do it when they have time here or there. Some people whip together a little something. Some people go crazy and overboard. Yeah. And then you just kind of listen to them together and have a good time. Just kind of no pressure because nobody's releasing the tracks. Sometimes they get released, but yeah, it's just a ton of fun.
So it really is a lot of people who love the music that are doing that are really working at these places, which is so nice to hear. It's like I've definitely worked at places where you think that people would be excited to be there, because it's someone else's dream, but it's not. So that's cool. Do you find that in the industry that you get varying degrees of influences? When you go to work, do you feel like you're finding people from represent multiple genres that sort of you learn from there? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, right? Every time we do one of these challenges, everybody brings this completely different take to it. And it's inspiring, right? Inspires me to get out of my comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
Why can't I just make a drum and bass track? Why can't I just look at this other genre and say, okay, how do they do that? I want to just like bang out some bossa nova because it's fun and, it's creative and it gets me thinking about things a little bit of a different way. So yeah, it's the best I could say is it's inspiring to work with other people and get to like get exposed to their sort of creative process and their approaches to things, especially if you're both trying to you're both faced with the same challenge. How do two different people kind of come about that?
Yeah,
is really awesome.
So when you started, I remember you used to, I think you were one of the first people that really introduced me to Adult Swim. I felt like I was in your basement and you had like 20, whatever that C Lab show was on. And I was like, oh man, what is all this nonsense? And I just realized the new Aqua Teen movie's out. I definitely have to track that down like ASAP, like today or tomorrow. But so have you ever, are you into sample digging at all? Like, whether it be audio, do you get excited about that? That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, for sure. That was one of the things that I really loved about producing, especially early on, was, just trying to find just really interesting, weird samples and put them together and create this kind of like pastiche style. I always found, for me, what attracted me was not, there was a lot of people who would go sample, searching for samples, digging through records, go to the record store, see what they got in the basement, or, using your knowledge of, sort of like different styles of music and, artists. Those just were never my strengths. I really found myself more interested in, TV and movies. And so I would stay up late, like watching weird old TV shows and things, and just like grabbing samples off of my like VHS deck. Or if I did go to the record store, I'd be digging through like the movie soundtracks, grabbing weird old sci-fi or like Bond soundtracks, things like that, and grabbing those sounds. And even for all of the ones that never made it into any music that I used, it was always really fun to just kind of like listen through from that perspective, like what things could I find and maybe find interesting new uses for.
Yeah, it is really amazing I just went through the exercise of reorganizing my record collection into genre. It was like all alphabetized before, and you find all these things and you're like, well, somebody sat down and worked on this for months and put it out. And the sounds are just there for the taking. Like, you can really do things with 3 and 4 words that twist it way beyond what it was, whatever, initially meant to be. And, so for you, was it always about the more obscure things? Like, would you sometimes not use something because you thought too many people might know what it is?
Yeah, going for something obscure, yes, right? I mean, not just because people will know what it is. I mean, I think that's kind of the fun of the challenge, right? I never really was interested in taking a sample that I knew everyone else had used, right? And just using that same sample, especially if, right, if you heard somebody that just nailed it, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to use that again, right? When you heard the Fugees use like Roberta Flack, right? Am
Right.
I then
Yeah.
going to take that sample and make a song out of it? Like, probably not. I'll just go throw on that record, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, looking for that stuff. And I mean, I think there's definitely another part of it too, which is, people's intellectual property. And so my perspective on it had usually been, right, I'm not generally working on projects like to get out there and to make money off of it. And so it doesn't really bother me too much if I'm using some samples from other work and, again,
Right.
finding new ways to use them. But I get where it gets a little bit trickier when you're talking about, putting something out there that you want to generate, thousands of hits on. And right, in this project we worked on together, right, we took that really seriously,
Right.
right, and made sure that everything we were using was come about the right way.
Because I
But
realized after I put on my first album that if you'd taken off all the samples, it would have been just me talking for like an hour. And like, and I really, in the long run, it was me betting against myself because I'm like, I was me going, well, this is never gonna get big enough and everybody's gonna care. But it's like then I never really had the option to try to make it big enough or make anybody to care. So I
yeah,
was like, yeah, I really don't want to do that again. So yeah, I mean, and that is the thing that kind of sucks about sampling is that there are now it's so much easier to do and there's so many more things you can do it with, but you have to be so much more careful. But you can just sort of make your own samples to a certain degree. I mean, I've taken some piano lessons in my life, but I've never even gotten good enough to be able to play strong with 2 hands at the same time. And that's probably the most musical lessons I've had, except for my brother teaching me a Ramon song on the bass when I was like 12. What about you? Did you have any formal training, or how did you sort of like how long did it take you to get somewhere where you're happy with your result?
yeah, well, it's sort of the same as you. My aunt taught me, she's a really accomplished pianist, taught me how to play piano when I was young. played that up and through, high school. I had to play saxophone, in a high school band, but never really took to it. I don't think had a particular sort of gift for either, and so didn't keep with them. So when I came into approach music, I think of myself as almost sort of like musically illiterate, right? I
Same
don't have
here.
a solid foundation in music composition or performance, and so for me it was really, it was just a matter of like putting sounds together, like learning about composition, taking it upon myself to say, okay, how are these songs to put together, how do artists approach their music and put these things together. But it's 100% a limitation, and it's something I see and I hear right in my music compared with others, right? You can hear that approach to it, are you thinking about the rhythm and how that interplays, with the melody and how you're layering, and there's a lot of nuance there, and again, I can hear that, and you can hear that from certain people when they have that sort of strength or that skill set.
Yeah, it's funny too, because you mentioned Def Jux earlier, and I think that was really when you, myself, and Judge the Disciple, kind of hooked up a lot back in the day to work on music. Like it seemed like that was sort of the area where music tastes really intersected, and it also I'd never heard anything like that before. Before I heard like Aesop Rock and LP, and it opened up my eyes of what a hip hop beat could really be. And I think Esoteric once referred to as the sound of my cat walking off across the keyboard when he was like dissing LP. And I think that's sort of, as somebody who has a cat who's walked across my keyboard, there have been good accidents and bad accidents. So, I'm not adding judgment to that statement. But did you have any similar feelings when you heard, like, for me, that's when a lot of this music, it was them and Atmosphere that sort of, coming around the same time as, like, for me, as like the 50 Cents and Eminems of the world. They made this music seem a lot more accessible and a lot more local, and then by that association, a lot more doable. Um,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that era?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my entry into hip hop. I hadn't been listening to a lot of it, not a lot of mainstream hip hop. I've been listening to stuff that people I knew were listening to, a lot of like, hardcore and honestly just terrible music. And not really exposing myself to a lot of different types of genres, not just hip hop, but beyond that. And so, when I ended up getting into producing and starting to listening to some of these albums that our friend Danny, some other people were listening to, it was really interesting to me. It was it was a completely different sort of like on ramp into hip hop with this different perspective that, I don't know, something about it spoke to me. And maybe it's because I love the sort of like the technical aspect of beat making, and there's so much stuff to just soak up. How are they doing this? How are they getting that crazy sound? And it definitely inspired my music and my sound, which I've heard a lot from other folks. I think like particularly LP and in his style of production for sure.
Yeah, he's still going stronger than ever today. I mean, it's I was very when Def Jux went out of business, and I want to say that's maybe around like 2010 or 14, I don't know, around that area. I was like, I didn't think. I mean, I obviously don't understand the business of their operation, but I thought they'd be the one that lasted. It really ended up being Rhymesayers, because so many of those labels from back in the day just, they just didn't last the test of time, and these artists sort of disappear. But LP's still around, Esoteric's still around, Atmosphere's still around. I remember I saw Atmosphere once on a show at Lupo's, and it was almost like a Bob Dylan moment at the Newport Folk Festival, because he showed up with a band, and like part of the crowd booed him. And I was like, I've never been to a show like that before, where people have been that like hostile, and the people like flipping them off. And I think he was offering like refunds and stuff. I don't know.
That's
But
wild.
though that does remember me, actually, it reminds me of one of the funniest things, that there was some show, I think it was an Idea and Ability show that was at the Roxy in Boston, and which I think is now something else. I forget what it is now. Um, I
Hmm.
believe it's the venue well known for where Aaron Hernandez was before he shot at people the first time. I think that's where he was, but I don't know. So, and I think Idea and Abilities were opening, and it might have been Atmosphere, and you're like, oh, my buddies are doing sound, we can just walk in, we just walk in the back, and in like, we'll meet up with them in there. And so we just, walk in, walk right by everybody, doors are open, took a bunch of turns, no one looks at it's weird, and we walk right in the main room. You look around, you're like, I don't know anybody here. And it was like, wow, it's that easy to sneak in these shows if you just don't know that you're sneaking in.
Yeah,
So I
that's
don't know.
funny. I do seem to remember that now. So I was working at the time, I was doing sound for a lot of places around town like that. And yeah, you kind of learn that if you just kind of like put a serious face on, like you know where you're supposed to be. And if someone asks you, you're gonna be pissed at them. You can kind of kind of get a lot of places. I don't know if that's still true today, but was
Right.
definitely true then and got us into that show for sure.
Any fun stories about doing sound? I know people take sound checks and stuff like that at all different levels of seriousness. I don't know. Any good stories from back in the day doing that stuff?
Yeah, nothing comes to mind other than I'll tell you what, right? You definitely working sound, you definitely get exposed to a lot of artists and see like what kind of artists are like genuinely good people and what kind of art. And there's one that always stuck out with me, which was if you remember this guy, Jim Brewer, who
Yeah.
was a big SNL guy back in the day and did a lot of these touring shows where he would do comedy, but he was also a musician. He played guitar. And so his show was sort of him sort of like jamming on guitar, doing some songs and stand up and whatnot. And most acts that we work with, you go in, you do sound check, especially if it's a big act, they're in, they do the thing, they're gone, whatever, you never see them. This dude just for whatever reason stayed to hang out with us between the sound check and the show. And he had some new gear that we were interested in and was just like, hey, let me show you this. Let's jam out, talking about gear, doing this and that for the whole time. Didn't have to spend that time with us. And so that was kind of like a wild experience. I've been around plenty of other celebrities that, never really like think twice about you, and nothing against them for that. But I thought that was kind of interesting. There definitely are some people out there that are just,
Yeah.
super down to earth.
Yeah, it is weird when you meet different people. Like, I've gotten to know some of the people who work with my album on like a more like, personal level, and you just realize, oh, they're just like every other person. Like some of them are just socially bizarre, and some of them are just more than happy to talk and like, give more of themselves than they even should. It's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a great experience. I think the funniest celebrity story I've heard, this is totally off topic, but I knew someone who was living in LA years ago, and they had a friend who was doing house moving, and they ended up moving Chevy Chase's house. And I don't feel bad saying anything about this guy because it's nothing about anything he's said worse. And I guess what he said to them is, if you find any money, you can keep it. If you find any pills, give them to me. And then there was no tip, but he gave them autographed pictures as tips. So if you see Chevy, set your expectations appropriately.
Hey, so I'll say this for me anyway. I don't need to like somebody in order to enjoy their art.
That
I
actually
feel like,
they came up on a different episode. I'm glad. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because
I
I
mean,
go back and forth on it.
if I need to, I'm in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Um, but
Because there's a
I've
lot
never
of people
felt that
too that
way.
that are assholes that we just sort of accept. It's like, that Elvis movie, I think would be
Yeah.
glossed over a bit of stuff.
But
But
that doesn't mean that that's how I want to be, right? If anyone ever cared enough about my music to want to sort of take an interest in me, right? I don't think that's how I would approach it. And it's really special when you meet people out there that are also like that, right? Other big artists, that are just genuine and willing to talk to you, interested in you. Is pretty special.
right.
But hey, you know what? Art is art, and it's a lot about like what's the outcome, what do you actually get on paper. So
Yeah, it's funny too about the topic about whether you can enjoy art from somebody who maybe you don't enjoy so much, is that I feel like it's very hard to pin down what it is you like about a piece of art in the first place. So it's like, I mean, there are things that I like that I'd be totally surprised that seem to go totally against my taste that I'm really into. So to try to like not only do that, but to pass a layer of judgment over it, of saying like, well, if not only do you have to know why you like this, but if it's for the wrong reason, then it's wrong. Like it's hard to do. Like I have like gut reactions where like if I see there's certain acts that like I finally I can't listen to Kanye anymore. Like finally now when I hear the music, I'm just like, yeah, the music hits differently now, and it didn't for a while, but.
yeah, I find it hard to believe I'm ever gonna not want to just jam to Through the Wire. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
I feel like I'm always gonna have something there. But I know what you mean, right? There's a point at which if you're exposed to it, right, what's going on with the artist, right, it's gonna kill it for you, right? I mean, that's saying that you don't need to like an artist to enjoy their music definitely has limits for sure.
Right. And it's like, I mean, if I'm ever watching wrestling and Chris Benoit pops up, that to me, it turns my stomach. It's just like, there's certain things where like, and it was with hip hop too. I often compare hip hop to horror movies where it's like, I'm not big into horror movies because like those images to me are just more than I want to handle. And like, but I also respect people can get over that like for some people, they don't have that. But for me, there's almost like a cost of entry that's not worth it. And for hip hop, that's true for a lot of people too, where it's like, well, you're going to hear some stuff that might be abrasive to your ear, but like, that's just kind of the cost of entry,
Yeah.
So I try not to, hopefully I'm not judged by my tastes and, you know, but what is exciting you now? Like, so you're always one of those people that like to turn to for music recommendations, and you tend to hear of things that I've never heard of. Like, what are you currently excited about?
Yeah, I don't know. I always get the feeling like I'm years behind everybody else. Every time I hear a new track that really gets me pumped up, I go and I look on Spotify and realize it's like 2016
Yeah.
that it came out or something.
It's like 400 million Shazams. I'm like, I guess someone beat me to it.
Yeah, so I'd be tough to say anything that's jumping out at me now. I've been just listening to a lot of weird stuff. It's hard for me to even know what genre the music is I listen to on a daily
Which is
basis, right?
beautiful, isn't it?
This track we were talking about earlier, Hex, I had to look it up, and it was referred to as indie dance music, which I don't think I've ever even heard of. I certainly wouldn't have picked that out of a hat if I had to guess what genre it was.
So actually, speaking of deconstructing, we were talking before with that song Hex, so when you hear that, do you know how it's made? I mean, was that made from samples? Was that made from someone they brought in? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if I remember the sound, it's a singer, it's a female vocalist or a male vocalist sped up. I'd have to hear it again closely. Just kind of like saying these words over and over again. They've got that sort of like sample rate crushing going on it, and they've got that low pass filter over everything, so it's kind of underwater, and then it comes up to the surface, and then it's just kind of like this, kind of like looped, chopped up vocal, and I don't think there's anything. Yeah, I don't think there's really any magic to it. I would assume that they had someone record it.
yeah,
But again, at that point, it's really okay. You're just treating it like it's a sample. So was it something that you just brought in and
right. You
recorded, or
make
was it
your own
something you
sample. Yeah,
captured
cheaper to
earlier?
make your own sample than to pay publishing and having to continuously keep those things going.
For sure, yeah. Just like we said, right in the project we worked on, there was plenty of times where we did that just to get the sound we needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So what else are you excited about now? Like music?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been working on some trying to find a sound, right? I've been working on for years and years the hip hop. I came back and did some more of that in our album. Otherwise, had been producing a lot of like trap music or experimental, and trying to find that like middle ground that feels right, so that I could put together a few tracks to just kind of, again, like I feel like once I find that sound, I'm going to know what it is, and I'm going to want to be able to put that out and share it. And so that's kind of what's kind of getting me pumped and energetic. It's going to be a long process.
Yeah.
I work slower than others, you know what I mean? But I'm okay with that, right? Because I enjoy it, and when I find the sound, you're going to know about it.
So this is interesting. I like to talk to producers about this. Are you one of those producers who's got 10 beats going and 5 of them get halfway there and then 2 or 3 of them get done? Or are you one that sits down with one and you work on that until you're done and then you start over? Like what do you have a big rejects pile? Like how do you work?
It actually changed a bit, because it used to be the one where I would get an idea and I would go into that idea. But we're talking about when I was in college, I could then go home and put 14 hours into a beat. Like I can't do that now. And so part of it is like necessity. I can't spend that much amount of time to like really start to finish, like flesh out an idea. So what I found is working on a bunch of different songs, and not even just different songs, but like even different genre songs, and bouncing back and forth kind of helps keep a perspective. So I'd say, yeah, right now I probably have like 24 sort of like projects in one state or another, and plenty of them will go nowhere, and then hopefully some of them will turn into something I really like.
Yeah. Do you use in terms of convenience, I found there's definitely some even iPhone apps that I love. I love Beatwave. I've made some beats. I found some beats, old beats of mine, and been like, where did I make this? And I tracked it back to a really dinky program. Like, oh, it's stood the test of time. Do you get into any of those either? Like, do you feel I know you probably get access to some of the best with where you work. Do you do you do you appreciate the worst of the worst with the best of the best, or how do you like to work?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I love anything that results in a good sound, and sometimes I've messed around with different programs, even super simple ones, because they just force you to just okay, all I can do is have a groove, right? And then I really got to just come up with a groove that works. So I like that stuff. For me personally, I kind of anytime I want to work on music, I got to be in the box. I got to be in my PC with the tools I have. Like speed up my workflow, right? I know how to I can get a session going super fast with the drums I need, drop in the right kind of bass to go with whatever I'm working on if I'm trying to like find something to do with samples. Um, and honestly, like the distraction is hard. Some people, can sit there on the train working on a track on the way into work or whatever they're doing. I can't. And so for me, I like to kind of like really like get in my zone and be comfortable and work that way. So for that reason, it just hasn't pushed me to look for tools like mobile apps or anything to work on music.
Yeah. You a drums first guy?
Man, I was just actually hearing someone talk about this in an interview, and I think the answer is no. I usually the ideas I get usually have to do with either there's a sample or there's a technique or an idea that I want to go for, and I'll start to get that idea together. That for me, the drums are really just kind of like it's the foundation for that, right? I want to put that on top of something that sounds more or less right, so I can figure out the song. What's the song going to be? And then at some point or another, I'll really like take a look at the drums and say I want to focus on making those really shine. But yeah, I think maybe I have, but very rarely just purely started with I'm going to put together a drum beat first and then put some other stuff on top of it.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about that, so we mentioned before about the samples. There were some tracks that some of the songs are songs that we technically co-produced. There were beats that maybe I made back in 2005, and then just knew I couldn't get the samples on, and I was like, I can't replace these. Can you? And I was super impressed with just like, we're taking these are beats that I made based off sample drum loops. Once you remove those drum loops, you put something in there tailored to my vocal that was so much better than what I had before. And that was something that I've tried to do before, and it always comes out terrible.
Yeah.
So it's definitely I can hear that it makes you so much more of a versatile producer, because I mean you're able to work backwards from an acapella in a way that I definitely find very difficult.
Yeah, you know what? It kind of clicked with this album, right? I can't say that I've done it enough to say that I've got a knack for it or right, like I've got the magic, but it did work, right? And definitely there was some trial and error, right? In finding out, okay, here's this verse. What's the beat or the rhythm under it that's going to sound right with it, and tried
Yeah.
a couple things. And with the song Doomsday for a Man
Yeah, I knew
Steal,
I
right?
was gonna bring that up too. Yeah,
I
yeah,
was going to say for something about that, I had this idea in my mind for this other song going. And when I put those together, the second I heard it, I was like, no, that's it. Yeah,
yeah.
it's got to be that, and working it out from there. So yeah,
All
it's
right.
like I said, just kind of clicked to
That
take.
track is myself, Esoteric from Czarface, Aztec from Hybrid Thoughts, and Cool Keith from Just Being Cool Keith. And I remember in particular when the Cool Keith beat came through, I was debating. I'm like I couldn't figure out whether it was lined up right. And it's Cool Keith, so you're just like, wait a minute. If I'm doubting it, it's probably right. And I remember I kept asking you, smidge it a little bit this way. And I think we eventually ended up exactly where it was. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know why I ever for a second doubted what Cool Keith was doing. But I don't know.
Yeah, that was wild. That was, hey, really special. I'm a huge fan or whatever, so get to work on a project and put together a beat and put our sort of styles together was fun. But yeah, definitely, I remember there being a little bit of work to just kind of like figure out how to make the two things work together, because I think that was really one of the last things we got for that song, right? The other stuff
Yeah.
we already had. So yeah,
Yeah,
a
it was
little bit
funny
of a
too.
challenge.
I'd keep hitting you up. I'm like, it might be so and so on this song. I sent an email and we'll see what they say. And I'm like, they want too much. But then it was in this case, it was Esoteric that was like, hit up Cool Keith. He's like, here's the information. I'm like, all right, Cool. So
Let's
I'm
do it.
super excited for people to hear that. And Aztec, if anybody's in the Boston hip hop scene and doesn't know who Aztec is, and I question whether they're really in the Boston hip hop scene, because that guy I'd say represents Boston hip hop better than anybody. And it's I'm super excited he's on that. So
Yeah, he's the shit. It was great to get to work with him again. I think the last time we worked together on a track was, yeah, it
oh, what
must have
was the
been
name of that
15
song?
years ago.
What was that? It was him
Can't
and
remember.
Judge. God, I can hear it, but I can't think of what it was called.
Yeah. If you think of it later, let me know. I'll go take a
Yeah.
listen. I haven't
I
heard it.
I definitely found when I was not only reorganizing my records, but my CDs, they were all I had my CD cases and boxes, I had the booklets and other boxes, and I had the CDs themselves in books, and I had like 1,500 of them. So I decided to put them all together, like combine them, and I was finding shit that I could never even forget. I found a bunch of stuff that were beats from you. I don't know whether they're amongst the stuff that I sent you before, but I might have some old stuff that you don't have yet, that viewers that you may have lost over time.
Yeah, almost certainly lost because I'm really bad at that and have lost so much of the stuff that I had. So yeah, whatever you got, send it over.
So have you got, it's funny you mentioned, have you gotten better at that over time? Because it's funny. So sometimes people like they get one loss and like never again. And sometimes it's like you think that, but you end up in the same bad habits.
Yeah, I think that's it for me. I mean, I like to think in some ways I'm a super organized guy. I can figure those sorts of things out, but something about the workflow of like keeping old sessions and everything just it just I don't know. I don't have the gene or something. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm glad I do a good job of keeping all the sort of like master files. So usually anything that I've made, I at least can listen to. But lost a lot of projects along the way.
Yeah, I still have my the first computer I ever had that I had Pro Tools on. I only save it because it has that trilogy bass program. It's the only it's this great bass sim. I think you were recommending I get it like 15 years ago.
Yep.
It's still amazing, and it's the only thing it runs on is that computer. So the only reason I keep it around is just to keep using that. But like what I would do all these stupid things with Pro Tools. Like every time you recorded something, I'd save it as a WAV file that was just named like 0.001 or 0.002, whatever, and they'd get disorganized and disconnected, and it was like trying to put a puzzle together in the dark with a blindfold, and you're just like, well, I guess that song's lost, because on my album we were trying to revive beats I made in like 2005, and I'm like, it's like I basically just hand you like C3PO in parts, but I'm like, well, we're missing the head. Like, what can you do for me? And so that's where I'll
Yeah.
say, like, dude, I don't know if you're taking on work or anything, but I just want to give you some flowers. Like this project, I sort of the Drinking Songs for Children, my album. I dreamed it up when the quarantine came up, and I just I figured artists are going to want to be working on things. I need to work on something new. This is finally my time, and it wouldn't have come together without the work that you put on it. Like, if anyone's looking for mixing and on their stuff, like if you're taking on clients, I get my highest recommendation.
Yeah, hey, thanks for sure for that. It was a super fun project to work on. I kind of like that thing of like taking all these old projects out of out of the crates, out of the basement, and like seeing what you can do to bring them back to life. Was a ton of fun. I enjoyed it, and yeah, I think that the results are pretty good. So looking forward to people hearing it. And yeah, for sure, I'm definitely open to that. So folks are looking for someone to kind of take a project they have and like, shine it up and get it pumping. Yeah, I love that stuff.
It's interesting too, because so different artists have different relationships with their past work, and I think even we found on this album that some of the people that we had old verses for decided that they didn't want to do it or whatever, and like I definitely found with that there's a stark difference between people who think all of their old stuff is garbage, and there's other people who still can kind of find something in it. I like the idea of sampling myself, which essentially is what it is. I know that if I made it, that it's still in play. Like there's no copyright there. How do you feel about your younger work? Does it more embarrass you, or is it more of something that you see as like building blocks you can still pick up?
Yeah, I actually really like to listen to it. I like to listen to it, especially if it's been long enough that I don't really, remember it. And it's nostalgic. I like to hear what, okay, how was I approaching this at the time, remembering what was going on when we made the stuff. So for me, I really like it. What I want, someone else to listen to it, or especially if I was in the room, I don't know, maybe not. You're right. I'd be a little bit self-conscious about it, but I'm proud of the work that I did. And I had some friends that encouraged me in this way too, which is to say that like it's tempting to want to perfect everything you work on. And you've been on this track for months and you want to just, no, I can still make it better, still make it better. And the reality is that never stops being true. You could have that song and work on it until the day you die and still make it better. It's release it and take all of that energy and all those ideas you have and put them into the next one, right? And then release that one, and then take all the leftover ideas and energy and put them into that. So in that sense, when I listen to the old tracks, I'm like, hey, I didn't even put any bass in this song, but I like it. I dig it. It flows, right? Would I do that now if I was going to release it again? Maybe, but I like the way it was, right? It is what it was.
Yeah, and it's funny that like now it has, that old stuff had a sound that was just the sound that it was now, but now stuff, it sounds like it was early 2000 stuff. So it had its own sound now. It was just the way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like even if you hear they were always remixing old Biggie and stuff like that, we're finally at the point now where it doesn't match up to modern recording. Like you can tell the quality of the microphones back then just don't match up with modern ears. So it almost takes on this new sound, even though it's always sounding like that. I don't know. I just think sound in general is a totally fascinating thing when you think about how it works, and just, yeah. Do you mix with headphones? You mix with speakers, or?
Yeah, I try to mix it up. No pun intended. Like I generally mix on just some like small monitors. And then really it's about like reference, like when you're trying to really dial in a mix or a master, listen to it on your headphones, listen to it in your car, go on different systems so you can hear different things. Or I got a lot of friends who swear by the bass pack. Have you ever used one of these things?
No, what's that?
So it's like this, literally, it's like this backpack that you put on that's
What?
like a subwoofer, right? Or they have some that you can like mount in your chair or whatever. And you sit there and it just reproduces the low frequencies. So you don't need like a super expensive monitors or subwoofer rig, because subwoofers don't always give you the right kind of like balance. And so, yeah, like some of my friends that work on bass music, for example, like they swear by, you can, hear or feel kind of like every frequency all the way down to that sub bass without having to pay a ton of money on speakers.
Wow.
Not for me. I don't know. I'll try one. I haven't tried it yet, but I do like to try to like vary it up. But if it's just like getting ideas out and just jamming, I mean, yeah, I'll do it on my laptop speakers, on my little in-ear headphones or whatever, when it's just about the ideas, I don't think that's so important.
I always make the mistake of using headphones, and then it's just your ears get tired way too fast, and you can't trust your own ears. I've over years picked stuff up, and I'm like, I know this sounded different last time I heard it, and so I'm trying now to get out of that habit. But
yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, maybe after listening to the album, people could tell me if I need new habits, but
I don't know. I can't wait. So hopefully I'm thinking it's going to be out in about a year and a half. So just to give people an update, we finished the album. It's been mastered since around February, but I'm working on a film that goes with it. So basically it's going to be as long as the album plus a few commercials, which music videos for the whole album, basically. It's coming along, but it's a one-man operation. So, but I'm making a lot of progress. Hopefully I have something to show in the next couple months, but
hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm super happy with it. So I can't wait for people to hear it. And fortunately no one's knocking down my doors to hear it. So there's a lot of pressure to finish it, but I want to get it done in the next year or so.
Oh yeah.
Cool, man. So anything else you want to talk about today, or anything else you want to bring up? Any inspirational stories or
No, I just appreciate you having me on to talk about this. It was really cool. Again, when you mentioned this before and we started talking about some of the ideas, it really got me thinking about it and looking more into some of the techniques we were talking about. So that was super cool. I think that was good inspiration for me to keep doing more of that stuff. And when I hear something interesting to me, chase it down, learn more about it. I find that more often than not, if it's a popular song, whoever produced it, you can find out, maybe you can learn from them what their process is like. So that was kind of a cool idea.
Artists are amazingly accessible now. I mean, I've had, albeit sometimes brief interactions with people that I never would have dreamed of years ago, just in passing online or stuff like that. And you're like, wow, this is pretty wild. Like it's, the information's out there. It's, so. We were brought up in the Dewey Decimal System. Can you imagine if we just still use that now every time we need to learn something? Holy shit. So, all right, man. I'm gonna sign off here. One sec. It's been, really appreciate having you on here. Ryan Randall goes by Upgrade. Be hearing more of him. We'll be shouting his name out a lot when the album gets closer to being come out. Maybe we'll have you on again then to talk a little more about something else then. So thank you very much, man.
Oh yeah, thanks, Tim.
You okay? Man size hit you took, dog. When's the last time you smoked weed? Yeah, I knew you got secrets. Everybody got secrets. You know you like to get wet though. Gotta have that hydro. Gotta have that hydro. Gotta get love to the green list. Gotta get love to the green list. Gotta have that hydro. Gotta have that hydro. Gotta get love to the green list. What's that, fool? Man, look, check this out. I ain't got enough but headphones right now. You what's up? Man, keep your money. It's cool. Man, look, just lay low, be cool, and one of them cuss over there you did.